Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on VMware optionality. We have an incredible program coming up for you. Just as a quick little housekeeping note up here, top corner, if you have any questions that you didn't get in during the registration, or you have questions that you just thought of now or during the show, you can go ahead and scan that and you can ask the question at any time. Also, down here on the page, there's also a chat opportunity where you can put your questions in there, and they'll get to me, and we'll see if we can get those answered as part of this. And with that, I will turn it over to me talking to Sean Smith from Broadcom. Hello, and I want to welcome in Sean Smith, who is an SE with Broadcom now. He has been working with us at Expedient for years. Sean, welcome to the program.
Hey, AJ, thanks for the invite and looking forward to chatting with you.
So, you guys have had a whole lot of fun over the last year, right? Kind of, what do you see? How do you see how VMware has handled, the transition since the acquisition with Broadcom?
Yeah, I mean, fun. It's been fun. Yeah, there's ups and downs, I suppose, with the amount of change that we've had going from VMware to Broadcom. I mean, it's two radically different organizations, and it's been it's been a tough road for a lot of things, but there's been a huge amount of good that's come out of it as well. So a lot of what Broadcom does and the way that they do things has really energized, I would say, a lot of what is going on with the people at VMware by Broadcom now. It's really, a different organization. There's a lot of focus, and I would say the focus is much more around the products, around the solutions, helping customers, cloud providers like Expedient, really get over, the transition. The transition was definitely, a bump in the road. But I think over the long term, there's really a lot of value to be had out of what Broadcom is doing with VMware. The new licensing structures and things like that are very different. It's a very different model to what it was, not only for end customers, but also for service providers. But I think the value that it brings in a much more coherent platform that is much more focused on providing solutions as opposed to providing products. VMware was really good at providing products. Where they kind of fell down sometimes was providing solutions. And I think the core focus, kind of where VMware is heading, is really to provide solutions for customers and solutions for cloud service providers. Cloud service providers are a big part of the business before Broadcom, and they're a big part of the business now. From the top of Broadcom, our CEO, all the way down to the people working in the CSP line of the business, it's a core focus. Every QBR we have with Hock, he talks about CSPs. It's a core business that he has as part of the VCF division within Broadcom.
And I think one of the big shifts that we saw was there was a big change in the licensing structure, but I think at the same time, it shifted over to, hey, this is how we're bringing things together. How do we actually put a lot of the products together? And VMware had a number of different silos around storage, networking, compute. How do you see those things coming together, and what do you see as the impact from that?
So you talk about silos. Yeah, that was one of the biggest problems that we had at VMware, and the CSP business was probably one of the most impacted by the way the silos worked previously. Although we were one company, very often the vSAN team wasn't talking to the NSX team, and they were doing things in these silos, and it really became very difficult to kind of again bring that solution-focused approach. In Broadcom now, everything comes under VCF, right? So that's a big change, not only externally but internally as well. The concept of the way licensing will work is going to be very different. Well, it is already very different, but it's also going to be very different in the future. With VCF 9, we have a lot of changes coming to the way licensing works as well. But really, I would say one of the key focuses that we have is to simplify things, right? We want to make sure that it's easy to deploy. It's a solution that really, makes the life of IT administrators, whether it's an on-prem solution or a solution with a cloud provider or a hyperscaler, really it's a ubiquitous experience, and it really allows the solutions to perform much better, because now, as I said, being under VCF, it really brings all of those products together. When you have to deal with compatibility matrices and all those things, which honestly were a nightmare before, trying to not only deal with compatibility in VMware products itself, but bring in all the third parties that we work with. And again, cloud service providers are probably one of the biggest impacted, because they do take advantage of many third-party products. Compatibility matrix becomes, an infinite nightmare. So I think that bringing all the BUs together from a VMware perspective is going to simplify the architecture. It's going to simplify the way that these solutions are deployed. It's going to make it much easier for a customer who is, an on-prem customer today to be able to work with cloud service providers. So I think all in all, bringing all of those things together under a single VCF entity, makes sense, not only in the way that things are licensed, but also in the way that things work and interact with each other.
Yeah, I think that was actually the part that I really wish was flipped around, that VCF 9 would have been announced first and then have the licensing changes, because I think it would have helped explain that value proposition shift. Because
100%. Yeah.
I think this is something that VMware has been working on like VCF is not a new platform. It's been around since like 2017, 2018, depending on if you count Evo Rack. But if you have the technology value proposition put up front and showing that it is all one contiguous platform, I think that solves a lot of the value proposition challenges. So with that, how does VMware continue to maintain innovation, right? You've had, the networking stack, the automation stacks, the operation stacks. How do you plan to maintain that innovation pace going forward?
So, innovation is one of the key areas that VMware has always been really good at. And, moving into Broadcom is really, it's not changed, other than there is more focus now on how we innovatively bring all of these things together. So you mentioned VCF has been around for a number of years. I started working with Expedient back, I think it was 2015 or 16, in the early days when you guys had, vCenter, and that was it. And you were carving up resources with vCenter user IDs, and it was really a nightmare. And I worked a lot with you guys to build out what became Expedient Enterprise Cloud, right? Cloud Director based solution, that was really, what I always tell people internally within Broadcom is that Expedient has been using VCF since before VCF existed, right? Because we took all of those components and we built a solution around what Expedient was doing with that. From an innovative perspective, Broadcom is actually, encouraging us to take the learnings that we've had from cloud providers like Expedient, and you're not alone in the marketplace. There's many other cloud providers who are also providing input, but you guys are helping us shape the way that these things are going to look in the future. As you know, we have several engagements with your teams and the VCF 9 team to ensure that what we're doing with VCF 9 really focuses on what cloud providers need. With VCF 9, a lot of things are being kind of melded into each other. We're taking the best of all the worlds from VCF automation, from VMware Cloud Director. All of these tools are coming together, and to try and mold a solution that really focuses on what you guys need. I think that's where the innovation is right now. VCF 9 is due to launch soon. And although it's going to be a brand new product, it's not really a brand new product, right? There's a lot of the foundational work that was done in VCF 5.2 that is going to follow through to VCF 9. But there are also some fundamental foundational changes that are coming. The way that you handle licensing, the way that you handle deployments. VCF operations becomes much more central in the way that you do things, not only from a licensing and deployment perspective, but also understanding what's going on inside the environment. With a tight integration of operations with things like VCD, ARIA automation, and which is now VCF automation, right? Bringing all of those things together is really going to help cloud service providers build solutions that make life a lot easier for customers moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that really comes back to that simplifying the platform and not having 5 different things or 6 different things, however, many components there are. And that's something we've been doing at Expedient for years now, is combining those components together. I think for end customers on-prem who are managing their own hardware, I think this is where you're getting that full stack benefit inside of your own environment. But there's also a lot of, change that happens inside of that helps, that it's going to require you to take on some additional time and effort to get the full value out of those capabilities.
Yep.
And you mentioned earlier about the third party integration stuff. This is something that I think a lot of people are, I would say, somewhat concerned about. But how is VMware working with the developer community and the ecosystem that it has to ensure that continues to be strong going forward? Because that's definitely a huge strength of VMware as a platform.
Yeah, so 2 things I want to touch on there that you spoke about. First, you talked about, end customers and making it easier for them in terms of the way that they deploy things. The intention is also to make it easier for end customers to work with cloud providers like Expedient, right? So with a unified approach to the way that these deployments are going to happen, it makes it a lot easier for cloud service providers to provide a easy button, right, to get to a better mix of offerings in terms of the way that they deploy workloads, right? Gone are the days where everybody says, oh, you have to move to the cloud, you have to move to a hyperscaler. It's the best thing. It's going to, change your life. It's going to be awesome. It certainly changed people's lives. Was it awesome? It probably was a mixed bag, right? There is certain places for certain types of workloads and certain types of environments. One size doesn't fit all. The hyperscaler cloud providers are really good at providing a one size fits all. Although I'm not even sure that I would argue that point. A lot of people do. I'm not sure that I would. If you've been and looked at the catalog of available services from the hyperscalers, it's tens to hundreds of thousands of different combinations of things that all work together in different ways. And at the end of the day, you generally get a big shock, right? So I think that what we're doing to unify and bring all of this stuff together, specifically for cloud service providers and end customers, it makes it much easier. Bring your own license or bring your own subscription capabilities are now a reality, right? Which they weren't previously. It was very difficult for customers to bring their licensing that they had on-prem to a to a cloud service provider like you guys. Now it's really simple, and we've worked with you guys. You already have some customers who are using bring your own subscriptions, where they can take some of their licensing that they have on-prem and work with you guys to provide a cloud offering for the workloads that make sense to be in the cloud, and that's really I think where a key focus should be. And you guys are really good at that. Cloud service providers are really good at helping customers understand where the right place is for their workloads and how they can get from where they are today to where they want to be. So I think that kind of is where the licensing and the help for end customers and cloud service providers comes from. In terms of the development community and the how we work with third parties, that's going to continue. It's changed a lot in terms of the way the OEM program and things like that work with Broadcom, but also the third party providers. Broadcom has always been very concise in the way that they work with third-party providers and third-party solutions. So, what we're hearing and what we're seeing on the ground is that will continue. There's going to be a focus on making sure that interoperability is a lot easier. As I mentioned, bringing these things all together will help the third-party providers as well, because they're not going to have to deal with all sorts of different parts of the organization to try and get that interoperability working.
And this has been a fantastic conversation, and I hope that all of you are kind of taking away from this where VM was really investing and where they're putting their time and their energy now, because I think it's a much more focused structure. I guess, Sean, just to kind of wrap this up, why is VMware still the best option for virtual workloads and for clients?
Look, I think that it's been a bumpy ride, as we said up front, but VMware still offers the best, easiest to deploy virtualization solution that really takes into account any type of environment that a customer has. The integration of Kubernetes and things like that with VMware is going to be and is much tighter now than it was before. A lot of the solutions that we are building will actually be relying on containers environments within this new solution. So VMware has a long history of doing virtualization really, really well. We did some other things along our way really, really well as well, and some other things maybe that weren't as great as they could have been. One of the great things about Broadcom, and some people hate it, some people love it. Broadcom really focuses on what works. They focus on what brings value, and they focus on how to take those things and really leverage them to provide solutions that customers want. So from a Broadcom perspective, there's always a focus on reviewing what we're doing, understanding what works, and quickly pivoting when things don't work. That's also a blessing and a curse sometimes when you move so quickly. So, I think that Broadcom and VMware by Broadcom will work to make sure that what our customers need and what they want to be able to deploy is going to be a core focus for the way we move forward. And our cloud service providers, are a pivotal piece in that whole process. The cloud service providers really are the way that we can help our customers fulfill an entire IT solution and cost effectively as well. A lot of people balked at all the price changes that happened up front. If you look at it, you'll see that in reality, once you take advantage of all of the other bits of the solution that are available, it's more cost effective than it was before all the changes happened. And a lot of customers say they don't need all those extra things. Actually, they do. And if you look at it from an architecture perspective, if you are not using a lot of the ancillary products that sit around, the basic vSphere, you're opening yourself up to many problems, not only, cyber attacks and things like that. So bringing in all of the parts of what VCF offers really is a very worthwhile endeavor. And if you're on that journey, cloud service providers will help you and really make sure that you get a good return on what you're investing from a VMware VCF perspective.
And with that, I think that's a great place to end. And we will throw it now to commercial. Thanks.
So OpenAI cares about agents because we believe that they're going to transform knowledge work. We think that they're going to help enterprises streamline their processes, make workers more productive.
Agentic RAG. So rather than just RAG, it is an agent in front of RAG, agentic RAG. I'm excited about the potentials of basically taking RAG and honing that in to be something that has even more business knowledge to your business.
Welcome back, everyone. And I'm incredibly excited to welcome back Harsha Kotakella from Nutanix to the program. Harsha, how are you?
I'm doing great, AJ. Thanks for inviting me. This is awesome, right? We've been connecting. Maybe, I don't know, we had a session before.
Yep.
So very happy to reconnect with you.
Yeah, it feels like the right time to get an update on kind of where everything is, because we spoke in June of 2024. So, it's now getting into, February 2025. It's been about 6 months, and a whole lot of things have changed even since we last spoke. So I kind
Yeah.
of wanted to get in with, where, from Nutanix's perspective, how do you guys perceive these changes that have come from this Broadcom acquisition now that we're about a year into it?
Yeah, from Nutanix side, yes, we see, I mean, it's an opportunity, right? But let me step back and think of it, tell you the context, like how we think about it, right? So Broadcom, from our point of view, is and has been doing what they've said they will do when they said the intent of acquiring VMware, right, to the investors. They actually have the same playbook that they've used with CA Technologies as well as Symantec, right? So when that acquisition happened, right, like there's a big wave of initial VMware customers who actually went through this during Symantec days and CA Technology days. They're like, okay, we're out of here. And then we got that wave, like looking for help on alternatives. And there's many other companies as well that like took the approach of let's wait and see. They extended their ELAs, right? So we see that wave as Broadcom is, changing their business model and then basically providing their updated ELAs. That's the next wave of VMware customers. They're looking for alternatives, right? Essentially, what they're finding out is whatever Broadcom is doing, there's a large number of customers, VMware customers, they feel like, okay, you know what, this does not work for our business, right? Like, let's look for an alternative. So, and Nutanix is positioned, right, as somebody who can help with these customers. And not just that, can help with these customers, but also set them up for future, like, how we view the future to be in this infrastructure ecosystem.
And I think that's a big key point, is that Nutanix is not just like another hypervisor. It is a whole
Yeah.
platform that goes along with that. So when
Yeah.
in comparing where, VMware has announced that they're going, right? They announced their VMware Cloud Foundation 9 and how they're bringing everything together. Kind of how do you guys differentiate yourself from that in
Yeah.
light of that?
Yeah. So I'd like to view this from a kind of an outside in approach, right? As in, like, what is our customers, right? If I think about, IT personnel, CIOs and IT staff, like, what are they looking for? What are they looking for support, right? There's kind of three big waves of technology shifts happening. One is obviously AI, right? Like there's a lot of AI, Gen AI usage that needs to be implemented, Gen AI applications within enterprises. That's one thing. The second big trend is the modernization, essentially moving from a VM-based application to container-based application. So this is the second movement that's happening. And then the third one is essentially managing a distributed hybrid infrastructure, right? A distributed hybrid environment. So these are the three big waves I'm seeing. And the reason this is happening is obviously, to enable that productivity and enable that innovative engine for the enterprises to get that software out to the market faster, to go to market faster, right? So these are like the big buckets of how IT is enabling for the business to happen. So now, if I consider like this is what IT needs, and Broadcom, for instance, when the last thing I talked about is distributed hybrid infrastructure. That means that having edge, managing your core, your data center, plus the cloud together, right? Whereas some quoting, Hawk Tan, what we said in one of the blogs is, we see the future is private, for instance, right? Like, that's how they've been approaching the market, even if you see with their agreements with hyperscalers and all. Whereas Nutanix has taken different approach. This is a key difference in our strategy, how we view the world, right? We view the world as something that's going to be with a distributed hybrid environment, right? Like where you have data at the edge, in the core, as well as in the cloud, right? So with that, we want to enable IT to be able to manage that complexity seamlessly. Also, taking the first two aspects of AI and Kubernetes, right? Like, providing that platform on how to manage the whole transition from VM to containers, right? Having that convergence going on. So you might have seen like the reason we've acquired D2IQ, right? As Mesosphere 2. Essentially, that provides a platform. We were known as a leader as a platform for VMs, but with our Nutanix Kubernetes platform, we also help you with managing Kubernetes, right? So that's how I view the market to be, and that's how we differ in our strategy to Broadcom, and how we could help the customers.
I think it's also that you guys have this platform already. You're not moving to it, right? It's been there. This has been your push and your goal as a company over the last, I'd say probably like 5 years now, is moving into this more holistic platform. And it's interesting to see you guys got there. And I know that even, from that standpoint, that's a huge, sort of step in the right direction in terms of maturity.
Yeah. And we have more than 27,000 customers to prove that, right? Who've relied on us with the platform. Yeah.
And so as we start to kind of look at people making that shift and making that migration, obviously that feels like a big deal. And we've seen a number of reports over the last few months where it's, these migrations seem more costly and more time consuming than previously thought. But how has Nutanix really handled some of those migrations and kind of, any stories you want to tell of like, oh, this one seemed crazy, but then we made it super easy?
Yeah. So migrations need a lot of planning, and they could be complex, right? Like, me, I was in IT before, right? So I understand migrations, and I understand any upgrades, refreshes, like, it takes some time, and it also has risk in it, right? However, I also want to say that this is kind of a day in the life of an IT, right? Like if you're an IT, essentially what you're doing, you're either operating, right? Like, your day-to-day operation, like provisioning and helping, your internal customers, right? Or you're upgrading something, right? You're always upgrading some applications that's going on. Or you're refreshing, right? Like when you refresh your hardware, anything you're migrating, using new technology. This is kind of a day in a life of an IT, right? So take it, so I think the IT personnel, they know how to migrate because that's what they've been doing. When it comes to VMware specifically, right, I think the perception is there because it's a big change. Obviously, they've been using VMware for a long time. So it's a big change. So just like any change, right, you would have some hesitation on like, oh, it's going to be huge change. I've been using this for a long time. But however, think about it as an IT person, like you've been doing migrations for a long time. And from Nutanix side, we're doing many things since we've talked actually, and before that too, since we've doing many things to ease this migration, right? Like to enable and increase the adoption of Nutanix. Like a few things that we're doing, right? Starting off with, first is toolkits. We're providing different toolkits to help with migration. Just an example is we have something called aptly named Nutanix Move. Essentially, it's VM rehosting service. Like it rehosts VMs from ESXi to HV, hypervisor, right? So it's tool set, and this is something that's used by every customer that Nutanix has, right? Like so, we see this is robustly being used. So it's from a tool set perspective. The second thing is, we've also heard from VMware customers on, okay, one of my scenarios that I have is I want to move some workloads to the cloud, right? And another scenario that I have is, look, I have, I'm based on 3-tier architecture. I have storage, like, that I work with. How can I work with you? So we've heard that, right? Like some of the recent announcement we made is we made a large strategic partnership with AWS, right? And we provide that capabilities to move any of your workloads to AWS. Second thing is about storage, proprietary storage. We have another strategic partnership agreement that we've done with Dell, right? Look, to help you, if you have an existing agreements with Dell, for instance, right? Yes, we're happy to work with you. Another thing to make it easy is if you have, vSAN nodes, if you want to reuse it, we've created a hardware compatibility list, right? Like where you could reuse your existing hardware, right? So that's the second aspect, right? Like one is the tool sets. And then another thing is like, different agreements we're making with the ecosystem to make it easy for you. And third is, of course, we provide, there's different promotions out there for customers as well as prospects. And also, our own services, professional migration services to help with that, right? So all aspects we're covering basically to make things easy for VMware customers to adopt Nutanix.
And I think that's really where this comes back to. This is not like a new thing you guys have done either. Like,
Yeah,
you've been helping people migrate from ESXi to AHV long before all the Broadcom things. You guys have been building these tool sets for a while. They're very mature tool
yeah,
sets.
yeah,
And we've even seen them in action. They're really, really great. When it comes to these sorts of migrations, obviously there's a lot of concern of, I'm now using a new, not just a new platform, but I'm now using a new vendor.
yeah.
They've got different support. I'm used to the support experience that I get from my existing vendors. How do you guys ensure that customer success? How do you ensure that you have really, well satisfied customers and that they're not
Yeah.
feeling like there was a regret in that process?
Yeah, so that's something that we're super proud of, AJ. Like as you probably also know, we always talk about our NPS score, right? Essentially, we have an NPS score of more than 90 for the last 7 years, right? So that's industry leading in our industry, right? Like
Yeah, I just want to be
that
clear.
shows
If
our
you're not
support.
familiar with the NPS scores, the Net Promoter scores, having over like 50 is good.
Yeah,
Having over 90 is crazy. It
yeah,
is a
exactly.
true testament, I think, when you hear that and you understand how the NPS scores work. It's kind of amazing that they've maintained that level too. It's not just like one good year. I think that's something to
Yeah.
really, you guys hang your hat on it, and rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. So people love us, right? Like that's something that I've hear time and again whenever I meet with my customers, right? Like I go to multiple other conferences or EBXs where I'm meeting lots of customers. That's something, before coming in, they're like, okay, yeah, we talk about NPS score, we provide great support. They're like, okay, that's awesome, right? Once they start using it and they realize what kind of support we provide, they're really, really happy and like super surprised and happy about it, right? Like how awesome it is.
And I think the other side of this is, as someone's making that migration and ensuring that satisfaction, you mentioned, some of the integration points that you had with Dell and those sorts of things. How does Nutanix kind of fit into that overall ecosystem that somebody might have in their environment already today that's not necessarily just the platform that the workloads are running on?
So one of the core principles as Nutanix is like when we do a product innovation is we want to provide that flexibility, right? Like, across the stack, the tech stack, all the way from like OEMs to different Kubernetes or VMs, and then on top of it, applications and services, right? So when we provide that flexibility, that's kind of built in our DNA, is like we want to provide that flexibility. That's the core tenets that we think about. So with that in mind, when we heard that, okay, you know what, people are looking for, different hyperscalers, right? Like, AWS or Azure, we make partnership with them, right? On, this is a choice that we want to provide to the customers. Different OEM vendors, right? Like, okay, this is the choice that our customers want. So we have different partnership with the OEM vendors, so that choice is provided, as well as at the orchestration layer, if I may say, right? If they want to use, have VMs, right? Yeah, of course, we have our own hypervisor AHV, or if they're looking for containers, right? Like, yes, we provide that platform too, a new Nutanix Kubernetes platform. So we're providing that flexibility across the stack, as things, for for basically whatever the customer wants to use. In addition to that, one of the couple of things I want to call out is our HV hypervisor has more than 1,100 validated solutions, right? So anything that you use in your, any other ISVs that use any other stack that you use, check it out. Like, we have already validated design, give you the best practices on how to implement it. We have much more exciting announcement as well coming, right? So we have .next, as you know, AJ. That's
almost had
coming
an
up.
exclusive there. Almost.
Yeah. So come join us at .next, and like there'll be more exciting news on how we're making more partnership and making this adoption easier.
Yeah, and for those of you who are in the US, that is last year was in Barcelona. So it's a little bit of a challenge to get to for folks in the US. This year it's in Washington, D.C., a little bit easier to get to. I think we can kind of wrap up here by asking, I guess, the simplest question of all: what makes Nutanix the best alternative to VMware?
Yeah. So with that, I would respond is like, where do you want to be, right? Like any CIOs, where do you want to be in 5-10 years? And who's the partner you think would get you there in most efficient, fastest manner, right? Time and again, I always hear, I want to implement AI applications, right? Or I want to modernize my legacy applications, right? So that I have that portability benefit. I can go to market faster. Or I want to reduce my complexity, do more with less, right? But my complexity is managing a distributed hybrid environment, right? These are the things time and again I see every CIO is prioritizing it, right? And that I can say that like Nutanix, that's what we're working towards, right? Like that's our differentiator, right? We can get you to that vision faster and most in better fashion than any other company here.
And with that, I want to thank Harsha Kotakella from Nutanix for joining me, and we will see you in the next segment. Welcome back. I want to thank Sean and Harsha from Broadcom and Nutanix for their time. I think it was a really, really great conversation that we had with them, but I think we need to kind of take it a step further. And one of the things that we kind of need to think about is, if you're not interested in staying with VMware and you don't want to go to Nutanix, what other option exists? And this is something that we've had the discussion with clients and with people we talk to in the field. I've traveled around the country, gone to all sorts of events, and had this conversation about these changes and what people want to do. And the main thing that I hear, if I don't hear VMware or other, alternate hypervisor, is we're going to the cloud, or in some cases going back to the cloud. And a lot of the reason for that is that many organizations have some hyperscale cloud footprint. They've got a handful of VMs that they moved out there, or they started building a new app in Azure or AWS or Google Cloud, and they already have it. They just want to continue down that path, or they start to kind of reevaluate their cloud strategy. They had maybe decided, hey, we're going to pull out of this. We don't need to do this AWS stuff. We'll bring it back on-prem because it's cheaper, or it's going to be less expensive for us to do that, or it's going to match what we already do. And now they're saying, maybe we should just stay up here. And I think the cost changes, or at least the cost view has changed to the point where even lifting and shifting seems less scary now. And they think, I could just, it's going to be more expensive to do it out there, but not as more expensive as it would have been before. And so when they start talking about we're going to the cloud, they're really focused on, what am I doing today with the Broadcom and VMware side of the house? And what could I be doing going forward? But when we start thinking about the overall cloud strategy, this isn't just about VMs. And when we start talking about this overall concept, we have to think about the cloud more holistically. Right now, we think about it in a like infrastructure as a service side of this is AWS EC2 instances or Azure Compute instances, but it can mean more than just the main hyperscale options when we start talking about cloud. A lot of you today are running off the shelf applications, and maybe those aren't your choice. Maybe a group inside of your organization said, hey, we bought this piece of software. Can we have 3 VMs to run them on? We also need SQL Server licensing. Wait, it's that much? All of those discussions that we see, that I've seen in my career, all of them are based around putting these applications into place that are solving some business problem, but that's where the majority of your VM list is really coming from. And a lot of those applications have moved into SaaS models for various reasons. The biggest one is that from the vendor side, they don't have to manage software updates and getting them out to customers and ensuring that they're patching and maintaining their software. They don't have to worry about individual support contracts or the way that this company is running it is different than the way that this company is running it and their support staff trying to maintain both of those things. They get an easier support lift, they get an easier deployment lift, and the customer just gets to use the thing that they want instead of trying to shoehorn it into the way that their IT team has told them to operate. And so because of that, you see this huge shift from things like this is our on-prem CRM system to Salesforce. This is our on-prem project management tool into Jira or Asana or Monday. And I can't see everybody out there. I'm sure you're all having a wonderful afternoon. But who's still running Exchange? Not many. In fact, Microsoft would really like you to stop. And because they moved everybody to Office 365. And the biggest reason for that is trying to patch and maintain Exchange as a platform across every customer running Exchange was getting to be a nightmare. And you know who's better at running Exchange than you? Microsoft. And so they make it super simple. So now people just sign into Microsoft.com, they sign up for a Office 365 account, and now they have email through Exchange and Outlook and all the Office tools. It makes it super simple. And so as part of looking at this, looking at all of your applications and looking at all of your workloads and saying, okay, where should we go? And we look at this as an opportunity to pay off some technical debt. And when we look at technical debt, this is the opportunity that you have to eliminate cruft that is built up. I've been in this game for a long time, and I know that the stuff that was put into production in 2010, a lot of it is still there. And the reason for that is that it's not broke. Nobody wants to fix something that isn't broke. And so what they want to be able to do is just kind of pick those things up and move them over and kind of keep the cruft going. But I don't know if you've moved out of a house that you've lived in for a really long time or even a short amount of time. But when you're trying to move out of a house, you kind of got to go through the basement. You got to go through the garage and clean up stuff that you don't need anymore. I know that when I moved 4 years ago, even then it was like, oh, hey, this was a box I moved from the last time we moved. Do we need this anymore? I haven't touched it since then. These are the sorts of things. This is why garage sales exist. But this is also what you have to do in order to make your move as smooth as possible. And in a lot of cases, this is where we discover the emotion of IT and finding out that some systems are just really hard to let go. If you don't have the ability to let go, you start to build up this cruft and you start moving boxes that you moved previously. You're like, oh, I can't get rid of this stuff. And this is why legacy systems are hard to replace. There's the technical angle of it of there's a lot of work and a lot of effort to actually do the migration, but there's also the emotional angle of it of, hey, I built this system. Hey, this is the thing that our business runs on. We can't change this. Meanwhile, everybody in 2020 changed the entire way their business operates in order to continue things moving forward. So we can do it. It's just only when we're forced to. And a lot of this comes back to a perceived and inherent risk in modernization. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You're touching things that aren't in a broken state. You are not actively trying to make changes. You are simply making changes for the quote unquote sake of making changes. But as part of the modernization, there's something that comes along with that. If you have some older legacy systems in the mainframe, AS400, iSeries, old versions of Windows Server, old Linux versions, and we see them, RHEL 4, Server 2000, NT4, we've seen them. This is where it becomes really hard to keep things going. They're not making new mainframe people. The people who are supporting it now are in their 50s and 60s. They're trying to retire, and it's going to be very, very difficult for them to do so if there's nothing to replace those platforms. The reward of doing all of this modernization and leveraging something like hyperscale cloud is the ability to maintain things going forward long into the future. Plenty of young cloud engineers, not a ton of young mainframe engineers. And so when we look at this, how do we understand what the benefits are and this reward? And then how does that play into how we handle the migration in the first place? If you're familiar with the 6 R's, I'm going to focus on 3 of them. And the main reason I'm focusing on 3 of them is that this gives us the ability to really focus in on the key ones that we've seen in the field. The first one is rehosting. The nicer version of this is lift and shift. We're taking our things and we're putting them into a new place. And the reason we do that is it's the least risky option. So for those workloads that, these are critical to the business, we cannot possibly ruin these. This is the easiest way to do it. At the same time, there's no gains that you get out of that, right? You're just taking it and moving it from one place to another. In this case, you may potentially save money if you're looking at licensing costs that are more than you're expecting, and landing them onto a hyperscale platform is an easier way and a cheaper way to do that. There is a gain there, but you're not getting a ton of reward out of it. And so this is where we see a lot of organizations utilizing this option because it's also the fastest. I take things and I move it over. There's a ton of tools to do it. It's actually a really mature process. And so that's why they do this. And in fact, if you move to a cloud provider like Expedient, we're doing this too. We're helping you migrate your workload from a VMware platform on-prem to a VMware platform with us or others. And so this is a way to make that happen. There's replatforming. And this is where you start to see the elimination of some technical debt. Not all of it, but some of it. Here, we're not really touching code. We're really focusing on what is backing this application. So things like, I'm on SQL Server today. I don't want to maintain a database server. SQL Server costs $1 gazillion at this point. So how do I enable the ability to access this database without paying for all of this? And that's where something like Azure SQL or AWS RDS and Aurora come into play. I'm moving my database. I still have a database. That doesn't change, but I'm moving it into a platform that I don't have to worry or think about from an overall maintenance standpoint. I don't have to patch SQL Server for security reasons. I don't have to deal with Windows OS patching or Linux OS patching. I can focus on just what data is in there and how do I deliver that to my end users. Things like going from VMs to containers. There's some code changes that happen there because of the way that VMs are deployed or the way that containers are deployed and the way that that communicates. But overall, your app code can go from a VM into a container in a relatively straightforward fashion. But this is where off-the-shelf apps go to SaaS. And by moving those things over, you start to free up your time of like, hey, I have 150 VMs, but now I only have 100 VMs because I took all these off-the-shelf things. We moved them all out to SaaS services. And now I don't have to patch and maintain those things and holler at the team that brought this app in to update their software because our vulnerability scanning is saying, hey, there's a ton of vulnerabilities in this app. So this is where you can start to see some of that technical debt get eliminated. But where the debt really gets paid off is on refactoring. And this is the big scary one that everybody thinks about when they think about going to a cloud service and making their apps fit. When you look at this, this is not just an investment for now, it's an investment for the future. And being able to leverage the native platform tools from a hyperscale cloud enables you to hit scale that you can't hit yourself, or that would cost you an arm and a leg to be able to do this all by yourself. This has the most risk in terms of you're making big changes to your application and where it runs and how it runs. But there's an inherent reward that goes along with that of now I can keep this going into the future. This is very time consuming. This one involves not just the actual changes that you need to make to the application, but also the decisions. How are you going to do this? What do you want to do? This is where, development partners come in to actually sit down and go through your code with you and say, hey, maybe you should change this, or here's a better way to do this. This is why this is so time consuming, because it's not just, oh, I'm going to move it from here to here. There's more to it. So when we look at hyperscale cloud overall, we're really focused on 4 things. We're enabling growth. That's scale to match the business growth, but also being able to take on those new technologies. And that scale goes into capabilities that you don't have. If you're an existing customer or existing company inside of the United States and you want to grow internationally, finding data centers, buying hardware, shipping that hardware to those places, how do I get it into place? How do I maintain it? That can be really, really difficult. It's like 3 clicks inside of every hyperscaler because they have a region that's in Singapore, Mumbai, London, Africa, Australia. So if you need to reach into regions that are not the US, you have the ability to do that. South America as well, just to make sure we got all 7 continents in there. And these are the ways that you're able to do that in a much easier fashion to enable the growth of the business, because that's what they want to go do. You're also able to modernize the platforms and get to a more flexible payment model, right? When I'm modernizing, I'm eliminating the technical debt and focusing on usage for things like retail, where I have my, my things that are on the in December, I need a ton of resources, but in June, I don't. I have usage that matches my spend in December. That's great. I don't have it in June, so I don't want to pay for those resources when I'm not using them. So this is a way to get more flexible, but that comes in to the application design. So let's answer the question. All these sound great. What's the best option? All of them. And none of them. The reason why it's actually none of them, but also all of them, is that there is no right option. Everybody is different. If you're in higher ed, you have different needs than a Fortune 500 company. If you're in healthcare, you have different needs than manufacturing. If you're small, medium business, you have different needs than large commercial. So your ability to take on any change is based on your organization's comfort level with risk, with security, with operations, and what you're able to take advantage of. The decisions that you make for your organization may not be the decisions that others would make. So how do you make the optimal decision? We look at the options. With VMware, it's a long time standard. ESXi is still ESXi. vSphere is still vSphere. They're bringing all of their silos together to make one platform. And a lot of that turns into better capabilities across their platform. This is something they've been trying to get to for like 5 years now, and they're finally getting there. They still have an incredibly deep ecosystem. And here's a slightly hot take. Staying on VMware is fine. There's nothing that requires you to change. It's, are you willing to handle the licensing changes and take advantage of as much value as in that bundle as you can, versus saying, I got to get out of here. With Nutanix, it is the clear best-in-class alternative. And I know in the registration, I want to thank you all for submitting those questions. There were a lot of questions about other alternative hypervisors, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But when we look at Nutanix, we see it as the clear best-in-class alternative with a platform that they've already built. They've already put everything together. And their customer-focused support, and this is not just Harsha saying it, I'll say it as a former Nutanix customer, their support is really great. He wasn't just spouting some nonsense there. I've seen it for myself. And then when we look at the hyperscale side, this is an opportunity for the future. And as businesses want to take things forward, how do you enable that at a hyperscale level and take on those skill sets and that investment in order to get there? But there's a better way. You can lean on us because we deliver all 3 of these options. We are a Pinnacle partner with VMware, so we can do things like Cloud Foundation license portability. If you migrate into the Cloud Foundation software licensing ecosystem, you can bring that over to us so that when your hardware is coming off of maintenance and you don't want to deal with hardware anymore, we find a lot of organizations are like, I don't want to buy hardware. I don't want to jump through all these hoops. You can bring that licensing to us and port it over and you're fine. And you can take advantage of our managed services to do our private cloud, our DR, our edge, to be able to leverage that Cloud Foundation licensing going forward. It's a long time standard in our environment, and that doesn't really change going forward. We see VMware as a long-term partner of ours. It's been a good partner to us for 15 years, and we see that continuing in the future. On the Nutanix side, again, we saw it as the clear best-in-class alternative, and that's why we've made the investment to roll out Nutanix Private Cloud, DR as a service, and Edge. We are part of their service provider program at the champion level. That's the top tippy top level that they have. And we see ourselves as the best Nutanix cloud, the provider of choice. We have an incredibly deep bench of Nutanix certified engineers and incredibly smart talent who are building a full suite of Nutanix services on top of just the base infrastructure. And part of this, if you want to move from VMware to Nutanix, is that we can eliminate the CapEx purchase of if you're on 3-tier moving to hyper-converged, we can help eliminate that and move into a total OpEx model and help you migrate from one to the other. And when it comes to hyperscale, we have partnerships with the big three. So we can help you optimize where your workloads should land, what's the best place for those things, and help simplify the operations across all of those. Because not every workload lands in AWS, not every workload lands on Nutanix. We can help you get to the right place. And that's not just delivering the options, that's the navigation through them. We can help you cut the discovery time by utilizing one of our free cloud assessments. If you want to learn more, you can scan the QR code that's there on the screen. And this allows you to cut the discovery time down by 70%. And we can even find cost savings of 30% in the existing environment because we can help get the resources down to exactly what you need and not having to buy in a bunch of additional headroom on top of the platform just so you can maintain things for projects going forward. We want to help you deliver the hybrid cloud of the future, leveraging hyperscale cloud, a private or multi-tenant VMware or Nutanix cloud with us, or with traditional on-premises infrastructure with Edge, and be able to deliver that totality across the board. But I know you've got questions and we've got answers in about 4 minutes. So we're going to jump into those now. And we'll go now to the very first question that will pop up at the bottom here. Broadcom VMware licensing is too chaotic. Will migrating our in-house VMware to a hosted provider simplify our operations? Yes. A lot of what we do from our side is simplified, not just the operations of the technology, but simplified vendor management. We're able to take advantage of our scale and be able to get you answers from vendors that are hard to get to yourself, especially if you're a smaller organization. So we can help simplify the vendor management so that when any of these licensing changes happen, we're helping to figure out what is the best way forward to help you not have to spend a bunch of extra money just because a change was made somewhere. We'll go to the next question. Behind VMware, Nutanix, and Hyper-V, what is the maturity of other hypervisors and players who are hungry for market share behind the big three? I think this is the KVM OpenStack Proxmox space. For these options, they are there. They're open source opportunities, but you are going to invest your time instead of your money. That's where this really comes back to. And what we have found is that in those spaces, there's a lot more of an overhaul to it. My backup platform doesn't work with that. Or how do I handle DR with those things? It's not as straightforward as leveraging VMware and Nutanix. And honestly, even something like Hyper-V. Hyper-V is even in like a gray area of Microsoft didn't do a ton of investment into it. Now they're kind of coming back to it, but they're still Azure Stack. Microsoft's in a little bit of a messy space. The rest of them are open source. And so you're trying to figure out who will provide you with support when there's a problem, and that can get dicey as well. So the reason why we focused on VMware and Nutanix is because they are the clear two best. They are the ones that have the best support, and we wanted to be able to support those going forward. Go to the next question. We currently have VMware running on Nutanix hardware. How hard is it to switch from VMware to AHV? That's actually really simple. Nutanix actually has a tool that you can basically say, convert this cluster to AHV, and it will go through and take the host, put a host into maintenance mode, convert the hypervisor from vSphere to AHV, bring it up, then convert another one, bring it up, and then start migrating VMs over using the move tool to actually take things from being on an ESXi hypervisor with VMware tools into Nutanix, leveraging the Nutanix tools, Nutanix guest tools, which are their version of VMware tools, and does it all in a very automated fashion. It's a super mature tool. We've used it internally with some of our clients who have wanted to make this switch, who are on top of Nutanix hardware. I've seen it in person on other platforms. So it's really, really good. It's actually just a button inside the interface. Next question. For clients moving away as a result of the merge, what is the motion we're seeing? Is it on-prem? Is it hyperscale? I think it's really coming down to a lot of organizations see jumping to a cloud model, migrating up to IaaS and a cloud is a big jump. Leveraging somebody like Expedient as a provider makes that a lot simpler. We're also seeing a lot of just on-prem hypervisor replacement. They're not interested in making huge jumps. They're trying to solve the tactical problem for now, and maybe saying, okay, well, let's solve it for now, and then we'll get a couple of years down the road, and we'll make a bigger strategic change. So we've seen a bunch of different options. The one I'm seeing the most though is on-prem hypervisor replacement. We'll go to the last question here, I think. To VMware or not to VMware? That's the question, and it will continue to be the question. I think this is something that everybody is going to have a think about. Hopefully, you got some good insight from our friends at Broadcom and Nutanix. If you have any additional questions, you could scan to submit a question there. You could also reach out on our Let's Talk page and let's dive into what your challenges are and how we can help you in the best way possible. Join us next week. By the way, here's a way to schedule a strategy session with us. You can join us on March 5th. Go to our website and you'll see a registration link for the webinar on March 5th. We are running this with our friends at Disaster Recovery Journal, where we'll be talking to Tim Swingler, who's director of IT at Utz Brands, yes, the pretzel people, about how we help them through their DR challenges. And we're going to be speaking with them and Disaster Recovery Journal. And so you're not going to want to miss that one. So go ahead to expedient.com and you can find the registration link for that. And that is the end of our show today. And we will see you on March 5th. Thanks.